Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to go through the planetary transits, or Gochara, as they're known as in Sanskrit, for the month of June 2024. This is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, and it seemed like the kind of overall theme of the month was new directions and passion. So let's take a look. A note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. All of my, so if you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are my concepts playlist. So wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. My channel is all about playlists. I organize all my videos into playlists so that they're easy to find. So the playlists that you might tap into are concepts, grahas, planets, bhavas or houses, yogas or planetary combinations. Um, if you're looking for a specific house or planet or want to learn more about those things. The other thing is that I go through a lot of charts of famous people, places, and moments, historical moments on this channel. And I created a birth chart archive list 2024 video. So and in that video, I list all the famous charts I've gone through on this channel, and then the video that you can find them in. So if you like to learn astrology that way by looking at charts, you can do that. Other videos are helpful to watch if you're a beginner or if you want to get more out of this video, since it's an interpretation video and I incorporate a lot of different concepts. There's North, South, and East Indian style charts. I include Western style charts in that as well, but that's not part of the title. Introduction to navigating a birth chart. The Lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, first house. Introduction to the constellations or Rashis. Constellation or Rashi categories. Planetary aspects. Directional strength or Digbala. Natural benefic and malefic planets or grahas. Planet friends and enemies or graha, mitra, shatru. Planetary war or graha, yuddha. Planetary combustion or asta. Planetary exaltation, debilitation. Planet retrogression or vakri. Nakshatras or lunar mansions, bhavat, bhavam, house of the house concept. And then I'm going through, you'll see, I end up going through a lot of yogas in this talk today. So different yogas I'll be going through: pravraja yoga, sarpa yoga, parivartana yoga, saraswati yoga, budhaditya yoga. So yeah, it's this talk's chock full of yoga. So if you want to learn more about those planetary combinations, I have videos on each of them. Okay, so let's take a look at the dates when things are shifting around. Okay, so June 1st, that was a couple days ago, Mars entered Aries or Mesha, so its own sign. And when it entered Aries, it also entered the nakshatra of Ashwini. June 2nd, Jupiter left combustion or asta, and Mercury went into combustion the same day. Mercury's going to be in combustion until June 26th, most of the month. June 3rd through 4th. So Mercury and Jupiter, there's a planetary war that just ended. Planetary war is also known as graha yuddha in Sanskrit. June 5th, Mercury enters Rohini nakshatra. June 6th, there's a new moon in Taurus or Vrishabha, Rohini nakshatra. And that same day, Venus will enter Mrigashirsha nakshatra. June 7th, Sun enters Mrigashirsha nakshatra as well. June 11th, Mercury enters Mrigashirsha nakshatra. June 12th, Jupiter enters Rohini nakshatra and Venus enters Gemini. June 14th, Sun enters Gemini or Mithuna. So that's a samkranti. And I have a video on samkranti, actually, at least as far as muhurta is concerned. So you can check that out if you're interested in muhurta or auspicious timing. Mercury enters Gemini that same day, and when Mercury enters Gemini, there's going to be an end to a Venus parivartana that started when Venus entered Gemini. So there's going to be a Mercury-Venus parivartana for a couple days. And when Mercury enters Gemini, we're also going to end the K259 aspects. June 16th through 18th, Mercury and Venus will be in a planetary war. Then June 17th, Mercury and Venus enter Ardra nakshatra the same day. June 19th, Mars enters Bharani nakshatra. June 20th, there's the June solstice. This is known as a tropical Dakshinayana. It's kind of a seasonal solstice. It's not exactly the Vedic Dakshinayana. Vedic Dakshinayana corresponds with Sun entering Cancer or Karka Rashi, and that will shift every year. There's some confusion about what the true Dakshina is. So the tropical is more like a Western Dakshinayana. This is like the uh, point where the sun starts moving in the opposite direction. So if you're in the north, you're going to start moving towards winter season. Or if you're in the south, it's going to start moving towards summer season. Um, and again, because there's a difference between the Vedic system and the tropical system, over time, eventually, there'll be a bigger difference between the tropical Dakshinayana or solstice and the Vedic one. So at some point, sun entering Cancer will, like, in 1,000 years or something like that, will be, it won't be lining up with summer or winter solstice, depending on where you are in the sun, in the world. Anywho, June 21st, sun enters Ardra nakshatra. There's also going to be a full moon in Sagittarius or Danu in Mula nakshatra. June 23rd, Mercury enters Punarvasu nakshatra. June 28th, Venus enters Punarvasu nakshatra. June 29th, Mercury enters Cancer or Karka. Saturn goes retrograde that same day, or vakri, and then June 30th, Mercury enters Pushya nakshatra. So let's go ahead and talk about these different things and what they mean. Yeah, so first off, let's look at the sky pattern and how that's shifting over the course of the month. So I have two charts here. These are North Indian style charts, if you're not familiar. And to get to the first house rising sign, lugna, these are all different names for the same thing. You want to look for the square or diamond in the top middle. That's your rising sign. Okay, so that's the sign where, um, the way we have it here, that's the sign where some zodiac sign is rising in the horizon, is coming up over the horizon, and that's your rising sign. Okay, and then to get to the second house, you go backwards or counterclockwise to get to the second house. So where the big circle is in the first house or first chart, that's your second house. Okay, so these two charts, the first chart I have June 1st. This happens to be 3:09 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's not really so critical because you can see I've lined up both charts so that the ascendant is 1 degree of Aries. The reason why I do that is that when you put the first zodiac sign of Aries or Mesha, as it's known as in Sanskrit, in the first house, you get what we call a natural zodiac. And the natural zodiac is something you can actually kind of look at to get a gestalt or a collective energy for the whole world of humanity. Okay, so when you look at the lugna in both these charts, the rising sign in both these charts, you'll see a little one in the bottom corner. That little one actually corresponds with the sign of that house, not the house number itself. Okay, so don't confuse signs with houses in terms of the designation of the little numbers in the corner there. Okay, so let's look at this first chart here. This first chart we have the moon nakshatra. So nakshatra is a lunar mansion. Every night the moon shifts into a different part of the sky, and over about 27.5 days or so, the moon will go through the entire zodiac. So there are 27 of these nakshatras. So every night the moon enters a different lunar mansion or a lunar house. So the lunar house in which moon was on June 1st was Uttara Bhadrapada. Uttara Bhadrapada is symbolized by the back legs of a funeral pyre. So there's a lot of I would say destructive energy, but Uttara Bhadrapada, the second one, the first one's Purva Bhadrapada, which is the front two legs of the funeral pyre. And the Purva Bhadrapada energy is a lot more destructive. The Uttara Bhadrapada is more of like a conscious release, because the whole notion of a funeral pyre and cremation is the releasing of the soul so it can reincarnate. And also, Uttar Bhadrapada is fully, that nakshatra is fully in the sign of Pisces, which is the last sign of the zodiac. So again, there's more kind of release and ending um, ending energy there. And also, Pisces is emotional. It's the water sign, so it's an emotional sign. So there's a lot of like conscious emotional release here. Okay. That's just coming from the moon because the moon also represents like the emotions and also the emotional mind, the intuitive mind. So it looks like at the beginning of the month there was something that was, consciously released or lost. The Dasha period or planetary period of this moment in time is Saturn, K2, Saturn, Jupiter. So that already tells me a lot because Saturn and K2 are two planets that are very separatist planets. Saturn tends to be a planet about obstacles and delays and that sort of thing. Saturn happens to be in its own sign of Aquarius during this month. And so Aquarius is a fixed air sign. So you can kind of think of like an old paradigm that doesn't shift or change very much, very fixed in its nature. And K2 is, again, a separatist planet here, but more of like an erratic, kind of cutting off or release. K2 does have spiritual energy associated with it. So again, it's kind of with the moon in the 12th house here. The 12th house can represent things like isolated places, foreign places, but even isolated or foreign places could mean something like an ashram or a church or a temple, mosque, that sort of thing. So it looks like there's some drive here um, to take a step back and release something. Okay, and then we are also looking at Jupiter. And at the time of this first chart, Jupiter was combust. Um, so you can't see Jupiter and the things that Jupiter represents. And in this chart, Jupiter is owning the ninth house of like authority and religion, and also the 12th house of law. So you can see that we're kind of getting, again, this in several ways, like releasing control of or releasing something. And again, since Jupiter is combust and you can't see it because it's so close to the sun, this would be like more of an internal release. Maybe releasing idealism potentially because Jupiter represents optimism. So yeah, and then also K2 there, you can see K2's in the sixth house of enemies and that sort of thing. And then what's on it? Moon and Mars and Jupiter are all on K2. So and Mars represents things like enemies, planet. So you have the planet representing enemies and the house representing enemies. So this could be like even like letting go of a fight, that sort of thing. The other thing about this chart is that there are 7 planets in either a sign of Venus or Jupiter out of 9. So the only ones not in a sign of Jupiter or Venus are K2 and Saturn, which is interesting since we're running the Dasha of those planets. And the thing about Venus and Jupiter, though, is that they're both combust at the time of this chart. So the houses, it's like it's basically showing that these all these planets, conglomerated and Pisces and Taurus, there's no solid ground for them right now. So again, this might be very internal. This might not be whatever this release or loss is. It might be something that's going on deep within, but hasn't really like the moves or conversations to manifest a physical release have not happened yet, potentially. Okay, so Jupiter and Venus are combust during this first chart. And then we have a bunch of different yogas here. We have Kala Sarpa yoga, so all the planets pretty much on one side of Ketu Rahu. So that's going to be an ambition and also kind of unusual, hidden, unexpected kind of quality type energy coming from that. We have Saraswati yoga, so that's the Jupiter, Mercury, Venus in the second house. So that's going to be creativity and education. We have a budhaditya yoga. So we have Sun and Mercury together in the second house. And that's qualified because Sun owns the fifth house of intellect. So looks like there's, intelligence here, like almost like but usually what I see with Buddha Ditya Yoga is it's more of like a more calculating type of intelligence. And then with these four planets in the second house, we've got a pravraja yoga or life focus. So you can see there's a lot of energy here in the second house, the 12th house, um, ramping up because you can also see Mars is in the last degree of Pisces. So this same day, later this same day, Mars is going to shift into its own sign in the Lugna. And that means there's going to be a whole brand new fresh start going on here. Some new initiative, some new action that's coming out of this. So this is really the background for whatever was launched. It looks like something was launched, the first of the month. We do also have a Sadhisati going on here. So Sadhisati is when the Saturn goes through the sign before, through, or after the moon. So that's another indication that there's usually when there's a Sadhisati, that's an indication. When somebody's going through Sadhisati, that's an indication that they're losing some long-term support structure in their life. Okay. So with these, planets in the second house, that's kind of nice because Venus is in its own house, and Venus and Jupiter are the two great benefics. But the thing is, at this moment in time, they're both combo, so it's like deep within. And Mercury and Jupiter are going to flip over the next few days and go through war and then flip. So Mercury is going to go combust, and Jupiter is going to come back online. So Mercury and Jupiter are all about education, learning, speaking, and this is a house about oral communication. So this could be what I'm seeing here, especially when Mars slips into the first house and it not only enters Aries, but Ashwini. Ashwini nakshatra is symbolized by the Kumara twins, who are the celestial healers. And there's this kind of rescuing energy that comes along with Ashwini. So there's going to be, I think, this effort to rescue something here. Whether it's this old thing that's released, I'm not sure, but it could be that this old thing needs to be released so that the new thing can be rescued. Yeah. But there's creativity here, intelligence here, recovering, also communications, because the second house also represents things like family and inner circle. So if there's been some strife or tension there, this might be an indication that over the course of the next month, there's some initiative to kind of recover that. Second house also represents savings, so there might be an effort to and some assets, movable assets. So it might be an effort to rebuild that kind of thing in one's life. But again, I'm feeling like I'm seeing here that this is after some confusion and feeling unsupported because we have this Moon Rahu Mars combination in the 12th house. So at the very top, almost 3 o'clock in the morning or so, June 1st, the Lagnesha, the ruling planet for the chart has gone to 12th house of laws. And Rahu is with Mars. Rahu and Mars together can be ambition and drive, but like confusing directions, confusing actions, especially being in Pisces, a dual sign. So, and then the moon is there as well. So it's not only actions that are, um, confusing or misdirected, but it's also the mind. It's kind of going a bit helter-skelter, maybe even being a little bit obsessive, frankly. When you get Rahu and Moon and Mars together, it can be like obsession. It can also be potentially, it could also be a drive to just, take a step back and try to regroup and get oneself from action, think a little bit, reflect a little bit on what's going on in the mind and how it's affecting the actions and how maybe to get better moving forward. Then the second chart here, this is June 30th, 2024. It happens to be 1:15 in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. Again, in Aries Lugna to recreate the natural zodiac. Now the moon is in the nakshatra of Ashwini. So now the mind, not only the actions, are kind of moving in the direction, in some new direction of healing and rescuing, but the mind is there. Yeah. And as they say, where the mind is, energy follows, and that's when you start to manifest, right? So I'd say this is quite a new emotional start because you have Mars, which is a very fiery, active planet, in the first house of Aries, which is a fiery, you know, uh, fiery, movable fire sign. So there's a lot of activity here, but a lot of mental activity as well in terms of starting something new. In terms of the Dasha period, we now have Ketu, Venus, Rahu, Moon. So that's also interesting because, the moon is again an emotional planet in Ashwini. So there's this rescuing effort here. I'm not really sure how um, successful it will be. Hopefully, it will be successful. But because we have Ketu and Rahu here in the Dasha sequence, in the Dasha period, and Rahu and Ketu are both planets. Well, first of all, they're in the 6 and 12 houses. So, house of enemies and hidden enemies, losses, acute, problems, that sort of thing. Um, so there's some drive here, but there's going to be some unexpected, like weaving back and forth, like unexpected events and stuff like that. So it doesn't seem like it's even though there's a lot of mental and emotional drive to maybe create something new or save something, we've got a lot of like pushback from Ketu and Rahu here. And then we are also running Venus, which is still combust at the end of the month. Um, so this could be like an uncertain emotional time, even though there's some, again, internal drive. The other thing is that Mars, even though it's in its own sign, varies, and that gives the first house and the whole chart some strength. Mars is also the lord of the eighth house of long-term losses and obstacles and that sort of thing. So you are bringing eighth house energy into the first house. Okay, so what else is going on? So Venus is still combust in the second chart. We still have a Kala Sarpa yoga. So there's still some ambition and drive. We also have a Ruchika yoga, which is that Mars in its own sign. That's a power. That's a Raj yoga power. That's a yoga planetary combination that brings power. You also obviously have a Chandra Mangala yoga, and that actually brings some level of wealth. So it looks like, again, there's some building here, but I would say mostly of self. Because when you have Mars in its own sign, one that creates a bhavat bhavam, which is a uh, planet going to like a first planet, first lord going to the first house, or second lord going 2 houses away, or third lord going 3 houses away. It's a concept. I have a whole video on that if you want to check that out. But with Mars going to its own sign in the first house, this is all about leadership of self and innovation of self and turning over of self and being resilient, because Mars is, especially in the first house of any chart, usually indicates resilience, especially with like some sort of knockdown or injury, potentially to the head, because that's what the first house represents, but it can also represent the whole being, the whole personality, not just the physical person, but the personality. The other thing is that we also have a bhavat bhavam with Venus, because the second lord has gone to the second house, because Venus owns Taurus, it's the second house lord, and it's gone 2 houses away to the third house here. So we have two bhavat bhavams here. And so I just, what I was seeing here is that, you've got Jupiter in the second house still. It's going to be there for another year. But Jupiter is now not combust anymore by the end of the month. And it shifted from Krittika nakshatra to Rohini nakshatra. So that's going to be pretty nice recovery energy for the second house, and second house matters, or whatever whichever house Taurus represents in your chart. Um, that's going to be pretty nice. But there's still, I think, some fallout here. But with Jupiter coming back online and Rohini in the second house, this could be like peaceful talks, bringing peace or kindness or compassion to family or inner circle. There's like a, you know, um, repair and renewing kind of energy coming here. Okay. What did I write? Restoring self and inner circle. Yes, there's replenishing the body and the mind. That's that Moon Mars combination in the first house. Self leadership. Mars in the first house in its own sign. Strength, resilience, innovation, um, and then rethink, break with old groups. Why did I put that? Oh, that's because of this Saturn. You can see Saturn is in its own sign the whole month, but with that little line under Saturn and the 11th house, That means Saturn's going retrograde. So, and that Saturn is aspecting 3 houses away onto this Moon Mars combination. So, and the 11th house represents clubs, groups, and society. So, especially when you see Saturn retrograding in its own sign, I would think of like a huge restructuring going on. So it looks like there's a huge restructuring here of clubs, groups, societies, maybe income as well, because 11th house does represent that also. But this is something with Saturn and Aquarius, again, that's a fixed air sign. This is something that's like long-standing tradition or thought process. Like maybe this is like a job or a relationship that you've been in for a really long time, and it's time to innovate. Whether it's restructure it, which could be this Saturn retrograde Saturn in Aquarius, but it's restructuring of the thoughts and the paradigm. Um, what's really going on, because we're not talking about like Saturn and Capricorn, which is more of a physical, tangible energy, because Capricorn's an earth sign. But this is like restructuring the way people, like if this was a person, the way that they're thinking about um, clubs, groups, societies, income. Okay, and the Saturn is also like again this restructuring, this thing that's going on in the 11th house. It's aspecting the first house, so this is also filtering into the psychology of somebody. That's a first house psychology, and this massive Saturn is also aspecting the 8th house of deep psychology, and this massive Saturn is also aspecting the 5th house of intellect. So whatever this like Saturn retrograde and Aquarius thing is in your chart or somebody's chart, at least collectively, there's a huge shift going on mentally with this Saturn on the first house, 5th house, 8th house. Okay, so yeah, so that's how the energy shifting collectively over the month. Okay, so let's take a look at the fire sign, the fire planets first. So, or no, the fire planets are Mars or Mangal, as it's known as in Sanskrit, and Sun or Surya. So the fire planets are all about, they're fiery in nature, but that means that they're all about action, yeah, and leadership as well. So Mars and Sun are both those, represent those things. The difference being is that Mars is considered to be more of like the commander in chief of the army. So it's more of like a leadership, like tangible leadership, hands-on leadership, like leadership in the trenches type person, you know, uh, rolling up their sleeves, getting their hands dirty, getting into the nuts and bolts of things. Whereas Sun is more like presidents or the king. And so this could be more of like a figurehead sometimes, or um, again, usually somebody who's like probably delegating a lot of practical issues out, but they're still the center head, center focus of like an organization or institution. Yeah. Both were again representing leadership. So June 1st, again, Mars entered Aries or Mesha and Ashwini. And it's in its own sign. It will be in Aries all month, so that's going to bring strength to Aries, which I think it desperately needed, frankly, because this massive Saturn has been aspecting into Aries for a year and a half now. Is it that long? Yeah, a year and a half. So this massive Saturn has been just grinding away at Aries. And so with Mars coming in there, it's going to give a boost of energy to Aries. Bring a little bit of life and juice back to Aries. What else did I put here? Oh, and then this Mars, once it gets into Aries, it's going to aspect 4 houses away into Cancer, where it's debilitated. So the Mars will bring strength to Aries, but it might stir things up, make things a little bit more chaotic in terms of whatever Cancer, house Cancer represents. And Cancer is a water sign. It's a chara, it's a movable water sign. So there's a lot of emotion. So there might be a lot of, again, emotional churning, which isn't too surprising given the collective energy charts I just went through. The other thing is once Mars is in Aries, it's going to aspect Libra. It's also going to aspect Scorpio. So this is also going to be very helpful to Scorpio because this massive Saturn has been, aspecting Scorpio. So all the Scorpio lugna people are probably like, exhausted as well, besides the Aries people. So at least through this month or and a little bit more, Mars will bring a little bit more juice and energy back to Aries and Scorpio. Um, Mars and Libra, it's not super strong, but not super weak. So it'll bring some activity, some initiatives to Libra in the house that Libra represents in your chart. But again, this is all about rescuing activities and initiatives, and it might be something like it might also give some false starts, frankly. Um, Potentially, because not all of these, Mars is a little bit of an erratic planet. But there may be because Saturn is aspecting at least into Aries, so you'll have Mars and Saturn in Aries, and Mars and Saturn in Scorpio, at least those two houses. You might get more long-term effects going on because with Mars you get the initiative and Saturn you get the longevity. But with Mars and Cancer and Libra, that might be some false starts. So it depends on which sign we're talking about here. And again, with the Mars and Aries and Scorpio, the planet either in or aspecting its own sign, that's going to be about self, bringing some energy and changes to self. The aspecting into Cancer may also might not only stir up emotions because Cancer is a movable water sign, but also home because Cancer typically represents home because Cancer is the um, sign for the natural zodiac. It's the ruling sign of the fourth house, which represents home and mom and that sort of thing. Yeah, so the Saturn aspect, and the other thing is that the Saturn, this massive Saturn is not only aspecting Mars, but the two Martian houses, so Aries and Scorpio. So, it's been a tough haul, definitely for those two signs. And, it's like there's a surge of power, a surge of energy, and an attempt to gain traction. But, again, when Saturn goes retrograde, it's going to be even more powerful. So, it's almost like this, I don't know, like what's coming to mind is like those movies where the superhero, it's like it looks like the villain's going to win. And it's just like, can the superhero do it? Just drawing enough energy and self empowerment, or whatever, tap into some superpowers that they can break through finally and overcome the evil villain. It kind of feels like that, frankly. There's this massive and the thing is, this massive Saturn, it's not like in a, um, fluffy, nice, fluffy, warm and fuzzy nakshatra. Right now, Saturn is in Purva. Again, that's the front two, symbolized by the front two legs of a funeral pyre. So we've got a lot of like, burning and churning and destruction and release, and also the deity associated with that nakshatra is a form of Rudra, which is the storm god. So turning things on its head. Anyway, so then June 7th, in a few days, Sun enters Mrigashirsha nakshatra. Currently, it's in Rohini. So Rohini is a very, very, as opposed to Purva. Rohini is considered to be the most lovely and attractive and seductive nakshatra, lunar mansion of all the nakshatras. Okay, and that's part of the folklore as well of that nakshatra. Is that like if each of the 27 mansions, lunar mansions, has a wife, which is part of the folklore, then the wife in Rohini was the most attractive, seductive wife of the bunch. So that's the energy. So you get a lot of like arts and culture and gardening and luxury and very sort of Lakshmi, goddess of abundance type energy with Rohini. And the sun is the soul. So, there's been a little bit of a reprieve, potentially, for sun and Rohini. And it's going to shift in Mrigashirsha. So that's quite a different energy. Mrigashirsha, on the other hand, even though the first part of Mrigashirsha nakshatra is in Taurus, part of Mrigashirsha nakshatra is also in Gemini. So on the Taurus side, this is going to be seeking like practical solutions, but it's like the soul or potentially purpose here, seeking beauty, truth, peace, grounding, that sort of thing. Sun's not particularly strong in Taurus because it is an enemy sign. But then on June 14th, Sun enters Gemini. So still in Mrigashirsha, but now we're talking, instead of talking about a fixed earth sign of Taurus, now we're talking about a dual air sign. So we're moving from a grounded, practical type of seeking to reaching for the stars, looking for new ideas. Yeah. And again, when the sun enters any new sign, that's samkranti. And again, if you're interested in auspicious timing, uh, kind of effects and observation rules and stuff like that, I have a video on samkranti and muhurta, or auspicious timing, so you can check that out. But when sun enters Gemini, that's a neutral sign. So sun's going to be a little bit more stable there. But now we're talking about, instead of looking for practical, tangible things, now we're looking for new, beautiful thoughts and words. Because Venus is also going to be in Gemini by the time Sun gets there, and Venus is all about beauty and compassion and the arts and luxury and that sort of thing. But Venus is going to be combust. So what the soul is seeking, when Sun gets to Gemini, is beautiful new thoughts and words within, like self-talk. Is what I was seeing here. Like trying to talk to the self and be more positive and loving and gentle with self. Again, at the at the base of all of this Vedic astrology is the paradigm that this is all based on karma. Like, if you have good planets, bad planet, I don't like to say good and bad, but that's how people talk about it. It's like, is this planet going to give me stuff I want, like a car, a house, a relationship, or whatever? Or is it going to, like, sink me? That's the way people talk about it. But what they're really asking is, do I have enough good karma to make this happen? Or do I have enough bad karma to make this happen? Yeah. So, when we start to I have another video on different types of karma and Jyotish, so you might be interested in that if you're interested in the whole karma story. But one of the types of karma is called agama karma, and there are a few places where we actually have quite a bit of self-will. And when we start to choose different, more positive, more loving, more collaborative type of thoughts, then those thought it's really critical. Like when I was looking at the charts, like for the beginning and end of the month. At the end of the month, when you have Moon in Ashwini with Mars, and you have this massive Saturn, restructuring the first house, the fifth house, and the eighth house. All the houses are related to the mind, and Moon is also the mind. Like that's a lot of mental restructuring, and that's really how to affect change. Like working from the inside out. Because if you think differently, if you talk to yourself differently, then you will think and talk to other people differently and you will choose different actions. So that's really like deep healing. So it was, very, apropos that the moon was in Ashwini. It's like rescuing the self, rescuing one's own psychology. Seems to be like a big theme for the month here. And when you rescue your own psychology, then you can move in new directions, hopefully more production, different directions. Then June 19th, Mars enters Bharani Nakshatra, so it's shifting out of Ashwini rescuing type stuff to Bharani Nakshatra, which is symbolized by a womb. So we have cycles of birth and death there. Because it's Mars, that can potentially go either way, because Mars can be an initiative of activities, something new, but Mars can also be a separatist type thing, like sort of um, cutting things off. So probably birthing new activities and actions, but we do have that massive Saturn on it, so I think it could go either way. Whether those new activities have longevity or not is another question. Then June 20th, we have the June solstice, as I mentioned, the tropical Dakshinayana. So this is where the energy either starts to wind down, if you're in the northern hemisphere, because that's the longest day of the year, and the sun is at its highest point, strongest point, Or if you're in the southern hemisphere, it's going to start building up and growing, and you're going to be moving out of winter towards summer. So this is kind of like the equivalent of in the northern hemisphere, summer solstice, high noon, strongest sun, and in the southern hemisphere, like midnight. So I'm thinking I might do a video on a chart for that moment in time. So we'll see. Hopefully I can get that done. Then June 21st, Sun enters Ardra Nakshatra. So now this is very different. Now we're shifting energies here. So Sun started off in Rohini, the most attractive, seductive nakshatra. Now Ardra is symbolized by um, like a drop of water, which comes from a storm. So again, we have a stormy energy, kind of like pravraja. There's like electricity, and again, Rudra, the storm god, associated with Ardra Nakshatra. There's sharpness. There's it's considered a sharp, ferocious type of nakshatra. Not easy breezy. um, and sadness can come from this as well. So this might be, with the sun here in Ardra, and at about this time, there are going to be other planets in Ardra, and then we're going to have a full moon in Mula. So towards the end of the month, there might be some sadness and endings again. It could be a sudden loss, or it can also be like insight or epiphanies, because Ardra not only does it represent like a storm, but it can represent things like psychology again. So there's going to be a lot of psychology and like insights, like a flash, flash of lightning in the head. And because Venus is going to be there at that time, this could be insights or epiphanies related to relationships or even art, that sort of thing. It might be also like actually, it's kind of funny, like more electrical problems with vehicles. It could be. Um, and the thing is that Mercury is also going to be there. And Mercury and Venus will have just come out of planetary war. So again, there's a lot of shakeup going on in Gemini, in the second half of the month here. Okay, but you can see that there's, you know, um, especially with Mars and Aries, there's going to be a lot of newness. But how long that lasts, we'll see. Yeah. Okay, so if you watch these monthly videos that I do, um, you'll know that I like to put in some charts of famous people and places and moments in time to, um, because these charts that I find replicate to some degree the current sky pattern. So these charts hopefully will help you, um, ground some of these ideas and thoughts into something a little bit more tangible or realistic, or something you can kind of wrap your brain around a little bit. Um, okay, so this first chart is for Ian Fleming. He was born May 28th, 1908. I don't have a birth time for him, and he was born in London, England. So, since I don't have a birth time, I don't have a rising sign, and the moon, you can see, is pretty close to the Aries, Taurus border here, and it does cross towards the later half of the day. So, I don't really know if moon is in Aries or Taurus, so I couldn't do a moon rising chart. So I ended up doing a sun rising chart, but I think it works pretty well. Um, okay, so who is Ian Fleming? Let's look at his chart. If you don't know who he is, let's go his chart, and then at the end I'll, talk about, you can see what he's done. So the Sun Nakshatra is in Rohini, so again, art and attraction. So already from that, usually when I see like the Sun in Rohini, I'm usually thinking of some kind of artist or creative type person. The Moon Nakshatra, again, I'm not really sure, but it was either in Bharani or Krittika Nakshatra. Either way, Bharani is the womb, so again, cycles of life and death. If the moon was in Aries and Bharani, then the moon would have been in the 12th house of loss, and also isolated places and overseas activities, that sort of thing. The moon could have also been in Krittika Nakshatra, which is symbolized by Kartikeya, the celestial chief of the army, very glowing, victorious type character. There's also this kind of foster mother type energy with Krittika. Um, I often see with people who have important placements in Krittika, especially like Moon, Venus, Sun, Mercury, um, Jupiter even, I typically see with the positive, more benefic planets and Sun and Krittika is some sort of writing. Important. Okay. But before we get there, again, just Moon and Bharani or Krittika, we're talking about birth, death, and victory of some kind here. Okay. Then the day lord was either Mercury or Jupiter, depending on what time of the day. So again, right from that, writing and education. I don't know what the hour lord is or a lord, because I don't have an exact birth time. The birth dasha was either Venus or Sun. Either way, Venus or Sun, we're here in the first house. Venus is more of an artistic type, you know, planet. Um, but Taurus, again, in Taurus, is going to be a fixed earth sign. Yeah. And Sun is about leadership and mastery here. Presidents, right? But it's like an attractive, seductive type, leader. Venus is in Punarvasu nakshatra. Punarvasu is symbolized by a quiver of arrows. So it has this energy of having a home base and going out and coming back, out and coming back. So there's some sort of, Venus can also represent travel and vehicles. And the second house here where Venus is, the Lugnatia has gone, is assets here. So the Lord of the chart has gone to the second house of family, of inner circle, speech, oral communication, um, of food, of assets. The second house is a artistana, so a house of material gain, right? So, um, but this Venus and Purnavasu, I would start thinking about like traveling and that sort of thing. And then it's with Mars, the Lord of the 12th house of overseas stuff. And since this person, since Ian was born in either Venus or Sun, because the Shah sequence is Venus, Sun, so you could see we're in the first house here, second house, potentially Sun, Moon. So the Moon is either in the 12th house or first house. Then after Moon, there's Mars, which is in the second house. After Mars is Rahu, is second house. After Rahu, finally Jupiter. So you can see for a long period of time, the first half or so of this person's life, they're in first, second, third, first, second, 12th houses. There's a lot of energy and development of self, and also overseas travel and then family affairs and stuff like that. Yeah. So this chart is similar because right now we have Sun in Taurus and specifically Rohini. That's an exact match. And then Mercury and Venus are in Gemini, which they are not yet, but they will be in about a week. Okay, so that's similar. So let's go through his chart and see what we see. So the Lugna again, Taurus or Vrishabha, rising sign, fixed Earth. So, pretty solid person here, or at least potentially. The sun's in Rohini. It's aspected by Saturn. Saturn's in Uttar, which is kind of like Purva, but again, it's more of this kind of like conscious release. And you can see that Saturn is in again the 11th house of clubs, groups, societies, and also income. But the Saturn is also creating some drag on the first house. So I think that there are some social issues here, potentially. Jupiter does aspect into its own sign of the 11th house. So that's going to bring strength, but I think probably strength and income. And there might be a lot of people that this person knows, but whether they're super close, I would probably guess not. Based on the Saturn or the Torpor. I mean, that's a pretty, it's not a warm and fuzzy energy. It's more of like at best maybe polite energy. Um, so what do we get from that already? So we get our profession, our master in the arts, conscious release or ending. Again, the Lugnatia ruler of the chart planet is Venus. It's in Punarvasu in the second house. So there's material orientation of ideas and writing and learning and travel. And that's because you do have this pravraja yoga, this life focus, 4 planets in the second house. So that's going to create a life focus energy. Besides, as I mentioned, because of the Shab period, you're running all these planets. Because again, either starts in Venus, then Sun, then Moon, and Moon is either in the 12th house or the first house. So if the Moon is in the first house, then basically it's like second house Venus, first house Sun, first house Moon, second house Mars, second house like you can see, like it's all wrapped up in the first and second house and some 12th house stuff. Um, I'm guessing the moon is in the 12th house for him based on some history of his, but I'll give him that. But you can see there's like a lot of material orientation for ideas and writing and learning and travel because these 4 planets, this Pravraja Yoga, is nested in house of Gemini with its ruling planet of Mercury. So it's going to bring a lot of like churning of ideas and conversation with various people. The other thing is with the Mars Rahu combination, kind of like what I mentioned in the was it the first of the month chart. There can be some obsessive energy here. This can be uh, erratic or impulsive behavior is what I'm seeing here. Impulsive speech, impulsive. Apparently, he was quite a smoker and drinker, which you could see here potentially. Um, and Mercury is in Mrigashirsha, so a seeking energy. Venus is in that's also traveling and stuff. Venus is in Punarvasu. Again, there's travel energy there. Besides, both of those planets, Mercury and Venus, are about traveling. And then Mars is like, kind of erratic action, and Rahu represents like foreign places and kind of erratic. Um, it has an erratic nature to it, and Mars and Rahu are both in that Ardra nakshatra. So there's like, flashes, there's not a lot of steady energy here, except for the fact that Mercury's in its own sign, which brings it some steadiness and some strength. But again, I'm just seeing a lot of writing and ideas and learning travel just from the second house. What else is in the second house? So ambition and seeking, discussing, writing, shocking, unusual actions and events. That's the Mars, Rahu, and Ardra combination. A lot of wealth, yeah. Mercury in its own, the second house with the Lord, second house Lord in it usually brings money, especially because Mercury is not combust. Wealthy family, yeah. Actually, his family, it was a banking family. So, fashion ideas, theories, speech, travel. So mentally, and this I would imagine this guy's like kind of all over the place mentally and action wise, which is kind of what I was mentioning with the first and last day of the month. Um, if you get your mind clear, then you can get a clear direction in life. But if your mind's all over the place, then it's kind of like, what is it, it's kind of like rubbing the genie lamp, but not telling the genie exactly what you want. Like, I'm not really sure, genie. Like, maybe this would be good, maybe this would be good, or maybe that would be better. And the genie just sort of sitting there with his arms crossed, like, let me know when you figure it out. It's the image that came to mind. It's kind of funny. Um, and also, this guy had a bunch of different jobs. Some of them included journalism, some of them included banking and stocks, and that seems kind of potentially far-fetched, except that um, the journalism you can see potentially because Mercury is in its own sign in the second house of communication, world communication, and then you have Jupiter exalted in the third house of written communication. So just those two placements, this guy is going to be like a massive communicator. Okay. But the banking and stocks, that's from the second house, but that's because he was kind of all over the place and wasn't doing well in school and was like getting into trouble and I think like having affairs and they sent him off to different schools in Europe to try to straighten him out and it didn't help. And so his mother had to step in and kind of bring him back and they're like, okay, here's a job, try to do this. Um, so that's where the banking and stocks came in. I don't think that was a major interest of his. It's just his family was trying to help him out. But yeah, you can see a lot of impulsiveness here in the person. Third house Lord is the newish moon, but exalted Jupiter and Pushya. That's you just from that alone, you're getting a lot of writing and publishing from that, which is true for him. The fourth house Lord is Sun. Um, so family in the arts as well, a well-to-do, attractive family is what I would get from that. The fifth house Lord is Mercury, which is really strong. And then aspecting the fifth house is Mars and Saturn. When you get a Mars Saturn combination, you usually get like an athlete or a engineer. And since this is the fifth house of creativity as well as intellect, I would see this his mind being one that's very detail oriented, very practical, but also like industrious. And apparently, when he wrote his books, like his first book, he wrote in a month. And apparently, he wrote something like on average 2,000 words a day. He would just like churn through. And with a fifth house like this, because a fifth house not only represents creativity, but I mean intellect, but also creativity. So he was very industrious, with this Mars Saturn combination of just churning through and like pumping it out essentially. But he was also very detail oriented with it, and like with his writing, part of what he's known for is all these like intricate details and stuff that made the story come to life even more so. Um, so what else? Yeah. Sixth house here. Sixth house lord is Venus, aspected by Rahu and Moon. So a lot of his obsessive thinking about difficulties is what I saw here. Um, and that actually fits in two different ways because even though I mentioned like the journalism and the banking and the stockbroking and all that kind of stuff that he kind of did a little bit, one of the major things he did before he got really serious with writing, his own stuff, not just like writing for papers or journals or whatever, was he was in the government. So this Mars aspects is the ninth house of government and authority, and Mars is exalted in Capricorn there. And then you also get Jupiter there. So you get Mars and Jupiter together in the ninth house. I could see that being like higher education and law. I could also see that being like, involved in the government because the ninth house can represent government. And he was actually during the war, which is when, which would be Mars exalted in the ninth house potentially. Um, what else? What else? Yeah, he was kind of like somebody who, with this potentially moon. I mean, I drew the line there for moon because we don't know if it's actually in 12th house or not. But even if moon is not there, Rahu's aspecting the sixth house of difficulties and enemies and stuff like that. And I think he did that, I mean, for his job because he worked for the Naval Intelligence Division. So part of his job was to work with like commandos and organized commandos and spies and things like that. And then that's what he ended up writing about. So his mind was constantly like churning through all the details of these sorts of things. Um, and then the seventh house lord is Mars, aspected by Jupiter and Sun. So I would say there's a lot of drive and leadership towards individual enterprise here, as well as relationships. So he had a number of love affairs. So I would see that from this chart. But there's also this kind of like emotional piece to it because we are talking about Scorpio in the seventh house. Scorpio is a fixed water sign, so deep emotional piece here. And Jupiter and Pusha, that's nurturing energy, and Sun there in Rohini, that's an attractive quality. So yeah, there's a lot of like canoodling, romancing, and stuff going on here, which is true for his life as well as his characters in his books. Um, and the eighth house lord is Jupiter. So we have Ketu there and Purvashada. So again, he's like churning. The Purvashada is symbolized by a winnowing basket. So like churning the wheat to separate the chaff from the edible parts. It's also aspected by Venus, Mars, Mercury, Saturn. So again, clubs, group societies from Saturn, Venus and Mars, love affairs, Mercury, writing, Jupiter, writing. Um, so he's sorting through in the eighth house. If you saw my eighth house video, it's all about like hidden stuff, because the natural lord, the natural sign of, or the eighth sign of the natural zodiac is Scorpio, which is all about kind of deep hidden things. So things like crime and death and spies, which is what he wrote about, and the art of writing about such things. So he was constantly, like, I could see his mind was constantly churning through all these different like people and personalities and scenarios and things like that. And then he was drawing from that to do with writing. The ninth house, as I mentioned, the Lord is Saturn, aspected by Mars, which is exalted there with Jupiter. So he could have potentially had a higher degree in law. He didn't do that. But also you can see government work, which was true for him. What else? Yeah, I think his Mars, because even like his government appointment, that was essentially be through his family ties. I think his biographer mentioned when they wrote about him shifting into the military that he had absolutely no credentials to do the job that he had. That he was so it's not by merit that he got there. It was his family support or interference, depending on how you want to look at it. That they're like, okay, you gotta straighten up here. Is what I was getting throughout his life, not just when he was bouncing around Europe as a teenager, but then even when he grew up. It's like, you gotta get serious, buddy. You're making the family look bad. I can almost see that kind of energy here. Um, what else does he have here? Okay, so then the 10th house, the Lord is Saturn. It's aspected by Rahu. So there was ambition, some ambition to work, but again, what kind of work? I mean, Rahu is also again a planet that represents unexpected turns and events and that sort of thing. So there's ambition, but how much um, actual practicality was there? I'm not seeing too much. Plus, that sign for the 10th house is Aquarius. It's a fixed air sign. So again, a lot of mental churning and ideas about career, but did it actually happen? I don't know. Because he was bouncing around for a while. Then the 11th house, 11th house lord is Jupiter, aspecting its own sign. It's going to make it strong with Saturn there. So we're talking about like writing, publishing circles. Also, that's going to bring him money and income. Then the 12th house lord is Mars. So oversees military operations because Mars symbolizes the military, and then the 12th house is overseas type stuff, which is a lot of what he did during the war in the Naval Intelligence Division. And this again was, then you bring with the 12th Lord going to the second house, you're going to come back from all these experiences and tell a lot of stories and then write about them. So he probably told a lot of stories and then he started writing about them. Uh, yeah, and during his teen years when he was running Mars, again, his family put him in different schools to try to straighten him out. And it didn't work, I don't think. Um, And then after the war, he was head of an international troop of journalists or something like that. So um, by that time, he was, out of Mars, maybe out of Rahu, maybe starting into Jupiter. I don't remember exactly, but so you can see throughout his chart, he's got money throughout his life. That was never an issue. Family support, creativity, and then his mind was constantly like churning about these unusual affairs, and that's what he ended up writing about. So, if you don't know Ian Fleming, he is the creator of the James Bond character and all of that, reading the novels and stories and stuff. He published his first book on James Bond with the James Bond character called Casino Royale. He published that in 1952. And as I mentioned, they said he literally started writing that book like in January, and the next month he was done with the book. It's like incredibly industrious, and that was his fifth house, and probably his third house as well, because he wrote that book when he was in his Jupiter Dasha, when the exalted Jupiter was lighting up in his third house of writing and classic arts. And the James Bond series is considered to be one of the most successful of all time. He sold over 1 million copies worldwide, and 27 films came out of it. So, all of that's Martian Rahu energy, where he was kind of here, there, and everywhere, even though his family was just like thinking he's like completely off the mark. Yeah, it worked for him in the end. So it's like he made it all work for him in the end. So, and it was very successful because of all of his bumping around with unusual folks and doing unusual things. So he capitalized on it. Okay, so let's look at Mercury now, or Buddha, in terms of its transits and what's coming for Mercury. So again, Mercury is a planet that represents things like education, students, travel, learning, the logical mind, rational mind. So June 2nd, Mercury just went combust, or asta. It's going to be combust till June 22nd, or 26th, sorry. So again, whenever a planet goes combust, it means that the thing that symbolizes go more internal. And since Mercury represents things like uh, the churning of the mind, the rational mind, logical mind, this could be a lot of like thinking and planning and deciding rather than like outwardly making things happen. Um, June 3rd through 4th, so Mercury and Jupiter were just in planetary war. So this could be like a decision because both of them were in not only Taurus, a grounded, fixed Earth sign, but they were both in Krittika nakshatra, which again is a dual nakshatra because you have this energy of Kartikeya, the celestial chief of the army, with this foster mother energy because Kartikeya was raised by different foster mothers. So it's kind of like fight or nurture. And so with Mercury and Jupiter, not only do they both represent education, but also speech and writing. And so there might have been this like mashup of like, do we fight or do we nurture? Um, in terms of the speech that we were using with self and others. Um, so there might have been some confusion or at least lack of clarity there. Um, and then Mercury will be entering Rohini nakshatra not too shortly. And again, this is like the most beautiful, seductive nakshatra of the zodiac. And Mercury is in, what is it, Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, and so that's a friend sign to Mercury. So Mercury does pretty well in Taurus, and then Rohini, again, we're getting this creative, artistic energy, kind creativity, and with Mercury there, um, um, this could be like again a beautiful mind, a beautiful talk, beautiful words, especially internally, like a lot of more positive self-talk, um, like what I was getting in the beginning of the monthly first and end of the month charts. Then June 11th, Mercury enters Mrigashirsha nakshatra, which again is the seeking nakshatra. It's symbolized by a deer head, and deer not just in Vedic astrology, but in a lot of folklore. The deer represents like going through the dark forest and trying to find one's way through. So there's this kind of seeking energy with that. So Mercury getting into Mrigashirsha, and again, Mrigashirsha begins in Taurus and ends in Gemini. So it might be looking for seeking practical solutions to questions or issues that are coming up. But then when Mercury shifts into Gemini or Mithuna on June 14th, Mercury's going to be very strong here. You're going to get more strength of mind, speech. Um, Mercury's still combust here, so like brainstorming. It could be a business venture because Mercury in its own sign can bring things like business because Mercury represents business and things related to business like marketing and tabulating and what is it? Accounting and those sorts of like number crunching type activities. And with Mrigashirsha nakshatra is specifically um, in terms of business related to marketing because it's going out and finding like customers or clients or leads or whatever. Also, when Mercury goes into Gemini, this could also bring, especially because Mercury's combust, this could also bring an interest in meditation. As I've said in my videos, when I see Mercury in its own sign, I've seen a lot of times in people's charts where Mercury is in its own sign that that person at some point in their life, if not their whole life, becomes very interested in meditation, like specifically Buddhism. So the other thing is that when Venus goes into Gemini, we're going to end the Venus parivartana. So Venus goes into Gemini, I believe, on the 12th, and So Gemini, Venus is sorry, Venus is going to be in the sign of Gemini. Sorry, Venus is going to be a sign of Mercury, and Mercury's going to be a sign of Venus for 2 days. So there's a parivartana exchange of houses there. That's going to make both Taurus and Gemini strong. And the other thing is that when Mercury is in Taurus, it is K2 will have a 5-9 aspect. And when Mercury moves out of Gemini, we're going to lose that K2 5-9 aspect. So that K2 brings a chaotic element to at this point in time all the earth signs, so Virgo, Taurus, and Capricorn. So there's going to be less of that K2 chaotic energy going on. Then the 16th through 18th of June, Mercury and Venus are going to be in planetary war. The sun is going to be there as well. So the sun is the soul, and Mercury is the mind, and Venus is the heart. And um, it's like trying to figure out the internal compass, like which way do I go? How do I line up my mind and my heart and my soul to move forward in life? So I think that's what's coming, in the middle of the month here. Some new internal direction and that's why the overall theme for the month was new passions and directions. But you got to find out internally first what that passion is or what that drive is before you set your course. So that seems like what's going to be happening. Then June 17th, Mercury and Venus enter Ardra nakshatra. So again, Ardra nakshatra is not a easy schmeezy, nakshatra. It's stormy, sad, electrifying, but also transformative type of nakshatra. So maybe this is the epiphany that's needed in this, tug of war of mind, heart, soul. There could be some sadness and letting go of some old ideas or maybe relationships. So ideas being Mercury, relationships being Venus. It could also be a fragile moment because at that point, at that moment, Moon is going to be in Swati, and as I mentioned, Swati is a nakshatra that's quite fragile in nature. The symbol there is new grown grass blowing in a wind, so something that's not quite established yet, fully established. And then Ardra again brings in this notion of like psychology. Thing is that I put here through June 5th. I don't know what that's referring to. I have to check. Um, that might be July 5th, I'm guessing. I'll have to check and see what that is and fix it. Clarify that before I publish. Hopefully I remember. Then June 23rd, Mercury enters Punarvasu nakshatra. So now once we go through this epiphany, mental churning, then we're starting to move out and we're doing the mental processing. So we're at home and we're going out, home, going out. And then there's a full moon in Mula on the 21st of June. So the moon in Mula, again, that's another pretty, sort of harsh, transformative type energy, and that's the mind. So we've got the Mercury, the irrational mind in Ardra, facing Moon, the emotional mind in Mula. And you've got Sun and Venus involved there. I mean, that 21st full moon might be kind of heavy. I mean, good because I'm pretty sure there's going to be clarity. But it can kind of go either way because again, it's like it's simultaneously something's getting destroyed and something's being planted. So it's kind of, going both ways. Then June 26th, Mercury leaves combustion. So that's when you're, ready, all this like internal debating, self-talk, planning, thinking, deciding. Now you're ready to move on these things and bring them out into the world and ready to talk and move, study potentially. Then June 29th, Mercury enters Cancer, Karka. This is an enemy sign for Mercury, and it's movable water sign, so it's an emotional sign. And so Mercury there is going to be like, whereas before Mercury was processing thoughts, now Mercury is going to be processing some emotions, which, the logical mind isn't always great at that. Because it's the mind, right? It's not the heart. Then June 30th, Mercury enters Pushya Nakshatra. We're going to be developing a little bit more like mental emotional stability there, because Pushya is symbolized by the udder of a cow, which produces milk, and at least in Indian culture and Vedic thought, is that that's why cows are revered, because the cows are so generous that they provide milk and nourishment to lost orphan species, other species, and not just its own. So yeah, so there's going to be a lot going on with Mercury, and again, Mercury, especially going through Gemini through most of the month, or at least the last half of the month. We have a lot of mental activity going on there. Okay, so here's another chart that is sort of similar to the current sky pattern, just to embody more of that energy. So this is the chart of the 14th Dalai Lama. So he was born on July 6, 1935 at 4:30 a.m. in Lanzhou. I don't know if that's how you pronounce Lanzhou, China. The Lugna Nakshatra Ardra. So that's Storm Nakshatra. So already from that, a very transformational person. Also maybe including some sadness here. The Sun Nakshatra also in Ardra. So this transformation piece here, but also like as part of the soul, but also part of the purpose. The Moon Nakshatra is in Purva Falguni. It's kind of quite a contrast. Purva Falguni is all about enjoyment. So the moon is in that sign, the emotional mind. The day lord of is Venus. The Hora lord, our lord, is Moon. So you can see Venus and Moon are together here in the third house. And those are the two emotional planets, the two feeling planets, And you can see they are aspecting the ninth house here, where this, is like this current sky pattern. We have a Saturn retrograde in Aquarius. So you can see that's the same as the current sky pattern. So even though you have this fixed, long-standing tradition in the ninth house of authority, religion, and government, which you would expect from the Dalai Lama, you have Venus and Moon here. So you have this emotional piece. So it's not just a kind of a cold, detached Saturn. It's like a long-standing religious tradition that actually helps us recover our emotions and positive emotions. The birth to Shah for him was Venus, Moon, so these two emotional planets in the third house. Again, Venus and Moon are also the arts planets, so the third house represents things like classic arts. And as you saw in Ian Fleming's chart, written communication. And the Dalai Lama has written a number of books. So Venus, Moon, and then Jupiter, Mars. So we have Jupiter also retrograde, strong. In the fifth house represents counseling, and Jupiter represents a spiritual counselor, which he was. And the Jupiter is aspecting the first house of self. Jupiter also represents teachers. So he was not only is a spiritual advisor, but a teacher. So, and this Mars, again, we've been talking about Mars, is a leadership planet. Yeah. So what this recreates, so we have Sun and Mercury in Gemini, which we'll be coming up to soon. Mars is in Aries by aspect here, and then Sun retrograde in Aquarius. You can see there's a number of similarities between his chart and the current sky pattern. All right, so let's go through. Again, his Lugna is Gemini or Mithuna. It's a dual air sign. A lot of thinking going on for this man. Sun in Ardra. He's got Ketu and Punarvasu. And he's got a Swa, so Mercury in his own sign with Digbala, directional strength, aspected by retrograde Jupiter in Vishak. It's like this is like a heavy hitter type of guy. I mean, this is like no joke, man. It's nice that he has his moon in Purva Falguni, I don't know if you've ever seen the Dalai Lama speak. I actually had the opportunity to go up to Boston once in this huge stadium. Yeah, you could barely see him, on the floor, the stadium, but he was there. But you could hear his voice. And he was laughing and laughing. He was just like, and it was just like kind of like, wow, he's not only funny, but he's very happy guy. I mean, he could be like I don't know, potentially a very serious, somber type guy, but he was joking the whole time. He just thought the whole thing was hilarious. Just, which actually, very heartwarming because everybody was so like reveres this man so much. I mean, he was probably very good at like breaking the ice and stuff like that because he's so like, I mean, beyond most of us, right? Looking around on the planet. So let's just talk about this so far. So dual air sign, a lot of thought. And you have Mercury in its own sign. So Mercury in its own sign is going to be strong. And again, a lot more thoughts because it's in Gemini. Mercury is in the first house. That means it has Digbala directional strength. It's going to make it even stronger. We have this massive Mercury of rational thought. The other thing I just mentioned in the last few slides is Mercury in its own sign often gives somebody who's interested in meditation and Buddhism. Hello. There you go. Here's another one for you. The sun here, the sun, well, we're going to get into, yogas and stuff. I mean, count how many yoga this guy's have. It's amazing. So sun is an Ardra, transformational leader, transformational, a career purpose. We have K2 here. K2 is spirituality, can represent spirituality, unusual, foreign type things. And I mean, he was, excommunicated from his country and sent on his way. And so he was kind of like a leader without a country. So this massive Saturn retrograde in Aquarius, this is like he's forming his own government, but it was basically a government of ideas rather than more of a physical place, like a geography on a map. So let's start looking at all these yogas. I mean, these yogas are kind of. Oh, the other thing with the K2 before I forget. So K2's in Punarvasu. So again, that home base and going out and coming back type energy. Again, this is like, leaving home, which is what, he was forced to do. Um, so let's look at all these yogas because he's got a ton of them. Okay, budhaditya yoga. Yes, Mercury and Sun in the same sign, qualified by them being related to the first house, which it is because Mercury owns the first house, and this Buddha-Ditya Yoga is in the first house. So yes, very, very intelligent man, and very clear, logical, rational mind. Then the pravraja yoga. So the Sun, Mercury, K2 in the first house also creates the pravraja yoga of life focus. The first house is all about the self and self-development here, especially development of the mind and psychology. Then we have a Bhadra Yoga. So this is Mercury in its own sign in a Kendra Trikona house. So that's going to give like an even higher level power of mind and intellect and education because the Mercury is so strong in a positive house. Then because of this massive Saturn retrograde in its own sign in the ninth house, this is going to give him a Shasha Yoga. So it's another. Yeah, I mean it's like it just doesn't stop. So then it's like so this is another power yoga through his kind of tenacity, I would say. And, again, this is religion and government. So he was both head of religion as well as the government. So he got all that from that. And then Mercury is also bhavat bhavam. So not only is Mercury in its own house in the first house where it's Digbala, but it's bhavat bhavam. The first house, the first lord has gone to the first house. So that means one self after another. So even this on its own, you could see as like reincarnation, like one self after the other, with the sun as soul and K2 as release. This is almost like a Uttar Bhadrapada type energy. The way it's one mind after another. He's teaching, he's leading himself and others. What else do we have here? So when we put this all together, we have a seeker because his Mercury's in Mrigashirsha, right? The deer running through the forest looking for light and enlightenment. Intelligence, this massive Mercury, Buddhaditya Yoga. Hold on, I think I might sneeze. Sorry, I tried to shield the mic from that. Um, Intelligence, funny, because Mercury's funny. Charm, because of this, Mercury in its own sign, dig ball in the first house. So it's going to be a resilient person, funny person, charming person, wise from Jupiter, educated, all about meditation. He's a leader, a master, eloquent with the two speech planets there, Mercury and Jupiter in the first house, eloquent, teacher, that's Jupiter, religious. I think that's Mercury in its own sign, just Jupiter retrograde aspecting, alternative and spiritual. Um, what else? Mind and self-development, insightful because of that Ardra energy. All about the Dharma too is duty. So, all these planets are in this first house of duty. Transformational, that's our Ardra energy. An immigrant, which he is. Sadness, I think, he's had to deal with. He had to leave his home and a lot of, he's displaced, right, in the world. And he's dealt with a lot of people turn to Buddhism and meditation because they're quite sad. So sometimes that leads them to the door, and then they find meditation and they rise above it. They rise above it. Also, publicity and social media with this Mercury Jupiter combination in the first house. So yeah, that's a lot already, but we'll look at the rest of his chart. So the second house lord is Moon and Purva Falguni. So again, he speaks joyfully, and he does. I mean, again, he's always laughing and cracking jokes and laughing at himself. It's pretty funny. Kind of surprisingly so for somebody who clearly has so much gravitas, in their chart. And being such a, heavyweight figure in religion and in the world and a leader of spirituality. It's pretty amazing. Um, but he speaks joyfully of ancient written work. So the ancient written work is this massive Saturn aspecting the third house with Venus and Moon. So it's part of what he talks about, but also most of what he talks about, but also a lot of what he writes about. So he's not, I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think he writes like fiction books. He's always writing about, Dharma and philosophy, spiritual philosophy and Buddhism and things like that, right? History, maybe. So old things, old paradigms of thought and religion and probably some political stuff as well, I'm guessing. And then, but he enjoys it. Venus and Moon are there. And Venus is in a nakshatra of Maga. Maga symbolized by a throne, but it's also the place, it's the specifically the star that represents the heart of Leo or Simha, Regulus. And this is the place in the sky where it's thought that our ancestors reside. So Venus and Maga is kind of like loving ancestors. It's also like tradition. When I see a lot of placements in Maga, typically I find somebody has a lot of tradition or ancestral kind of habits or traditions that they still maintain. They might be from another culture, but even when they move or migrate, they to another place, they maintain the old ways. So that's what he's got going on here. Um, and then Venus is the art, so he writes about this stuff. Let's see, it's third house. So I just went through that. Yeah, ancient religious philosophy, healer of mind and heart. So the Saturn, this massive Saturn, is in a nakshatra called Shatabisha, which is translates as 100 healers. So sometimes, depending on what planet is there, this could be like a something that's hard to heal or hard to diagnose. But at least when you have this massively strong Saturn, there can be delays and obstacles, but this could also be somebody who heals through religion, hearts and minds, and the heart is the Venus and the mind is the moon. That's what I was saying there. And again, it's beloved ancestors and masters and ancestors, and he writes and speaks about such matters. The fourth house, the fourth lord, is this massive Mercury, and he's got Mars there in Chitra. So Chitra is symbolized by a gemstone with a different facet. So it's a lot about architecture and Mars there. Mars is a bhumi karaka, so it's a planet that symbolizes home and land. And Mars, again, can be a separationist planet. So it's kind of like that Ketu in the first house of being separated from his home, his homeland, right near Tibet or in China. What else? I'd say seeking an alternative separation, seeking an alternative home or land. Because again, he's got the separation in the fourth house of homeland, family lineage, also spiritual lineage, but also it's K2, but he's the K2 in Punarvasu of like home base and going out and coming back and separation from home. Then he's got this massive Mercury in Mrigashirsha, seeking. So not only was he a spiritual seeker, but I think he was seeking home a lot of his life. Um, a physical home, not just a religious home. Then what else? The fifth house lord is Venus and Maga, Jupiter's there retrograde, aspected by K2, because K2 we get the 5-9 aspects of K2 because Mercury is in that sign. So spiritual advisor, teacher of ancient masters. That's what I'm seeing here. Again, some kind of unusual or foreign type um, advisor. Yeah, but that Venus is the lord of the house. That's the worldly counselor, and Venus is in the nakshatra of Maga, so ancestors and masters, beloved masters, and ancient masters because that massive Saturn's on it, and then Jupiter retrograde, it's the spiritual advisor. Um, and you can see that Jupiter aspects not only the first house of self, it's in the fifth house of intellect, so that's naturally how his mind churns. Um, but in the fifth house of advisement, and then the aspects the 11th house of clubs, groups, and societies. So he was the head of a lot of, through his position, the head, spiritual head of a lot of, monasteries. And then the Jupiter, massive Jupiter, is aspecting this massive Saturn. A lot of spiritual energy, a lot of, punya. Punya is good karma in the fifth house and the ninth house here, which he would have to have as the Dalai Lama, a true Dalai Lama. In the sixth house here, the Lord is Mars, aspecting, what is this? What did I write here? Oh, and then the Saturn is aspect here. So there's delays and obstacles with foreign enemies and governments because that massive Saturn in the ninth house can represent foreign, delays and obstacles, a very almost concrete, at least in mental paradigm, government. So he had to kind of form his own rogue nation. But his home country was basically an enemy to him. So that's there. In the seventh house lord is his Jupiter. Rahu there in Uttara shadow. That's a piercing victory nakshatra. That's very strong. It's a lot of drive in the seventh house of relationships, independent business, or independent institution, and is aspected by the sun. So purpose, Mars, the two leadership planets, Sun and Mars, the two fire planets, and Mercury. So he's got this drive to, again, be a leader of minds here. So ambition, success, and leading the mind, developing powerful government, business institute. Yeah, that's all there. The eighth house lord is this Swa retrograde Saturn. Deep mind, invested and focused on religious authority. Um, ninth, I mean, he was, he was, taught and steeped in this tradition since, he was a young child. The ninth house lord is this massive Saturn, aspected by Venus and Jupiter, Venus and Moon. So long-standing authority infused with joy, creativity, love, compassion, at least potentially. But it could also be the other way, where this massive Saturn is just crushing the Venus and the Moon. So I think it can go both ways in terms of he was trying to create a government that was more compassionate and creative and joyful, but the government he was born into crushed a lot of that because of its fixed ideology. Yeah. Then the 10th house lord is Jupiter again, spiritual advisor, as a career, what he's famous for. 11th house lord, Mars aspecting into its own sign. So here we're getting Mars in its own sign like we have now. This is going to be a lot of innovation, development, teaching, advising groups, and spiritual lineage, because you have the Jupiter aspecting there as well as this massive Saturn, plus a lot of fundraising. So, yeah, I mean, if he wanted to, he could be a pretty rich guy, but I'm pretty sure he gives most of it away or most of it to the cause. And then the 12th house lord is again is Venus. And so this was him potentially writing uh, some kind of written art, writing about isolated places like monasteries and ancient masters, and you know, giving a written uh, commentary and document of his spiritual tradition and lineage. So yeah, it's really like you can just feel from this chart, like wow, this is like a pretty like heavy. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird feeling with this chart. It's just so like deep, really deep, And again, luckily there's a little bit of lightness here with this Venus moon. And again, even the Mercury combination, in the first house, the Venus moon, and the third house, that brings some. I think that makes him more accessible because to the crowd, to the public, or whatever. Because otherwise, I mean, this guy's just so, I think, beyond where most of our consciousness is at that I don't know if we could follow him at all. So, yeah, that's him. Okay, so let's talk about Venus or Shukra transits in June. June 6th, Venus will enter Mrigashirsha nakshatra. Again, that's that seeking, searching energy. Um, it's in Taurus or Rohini. So, but it's combust. So I could see this as like longing for somebody or seeking somebody. Um, yeah, not being able to see, your loved one, whether it's romantic or not. Usually Venus is kind of a romantic connection, but not always. Somebody that you really love or care for. And since they've been combust since late April, that's a long haul in terms of not being able to see somebody you really care about. Now you might be starting to like kind of seek them out, and maybe within yourself, or this might be actually seeking somebody like a connection online. Because even though it's let me say Venus is combust, so you may not be able to see the person physically, but there might be an online connection or something like that. And also, this Venus and Mrigashirsha is going to be there with Jupiter and Mercury, the two communication planets with Sun. So there's going to be some uh, energy, fire energy there driving this in terms of soul um, and purpose. So, it could be trying to establish a connection with somebody through writing. If not finding a new person, maybe at least communicating online or having a video chat or something like that with somebody. Then June 12th, Venus enters Gemini Mithuna. 12th through 14th, there's going to be a parivartana exchange of houses with Mercury. So this might actually give a little bit of tension between mind and heart because they're both strong. They're in, you know, each other's signs, and one like Taurus is the 12th house to Gemini. Yeah, so there might be again some because when I was talking about the monthly transits in the first and the last part of the month, there's some sense of loss here. So this might be playing out. Let's see, Venus and Gemini. That's a friend sign, so that's going to help support Venus. But again, because Venus is combust and it's in Gemini, this dual air sign, it's going to be a lot of thoughts about love and relationships, maybe art, because Venus represents that as well. Could be business as well, because we're going to have Mercury in its own sign. So maybe this could be like a passion project or something like that. Like, oh, I really love this thing that I do. I love this hobby. Can I turn it into something like an actual business? I could see that happening. June 16th through 18th, that's that planetary war between Venus and Mercury. So mind versus heart, business versus relationships, and for some reason I kept coming up with electrical, of course. So somebody might be having that issue as well. But yeah, so it's this internal mashup too, because both of these planets are combust. It could also be something like, some off-kilter words with a loved one that may not be a blow-up fight because, again, both of these planets are um, combust. It could be like a friend and a loved one who are at odds here, maybe a spouse, because Venus can represent spouse with a friend, maybe the spouse and the friend. There's some sort of like argument, but it's almost like a silent argument. Oh. Yeah, so could be going on. Then June 17th, in the middle of this, though, Venus enters Ardra nakshatra. So there could be some sadness here if there is some sort of shift or change in a relationship. But this is going deep into psychology. So maybe the reason why all of this is coming up, this whole like Venus, Mercury, planetary war and stuff is to actually bring stuff to the surface of psychology um, regarding, things that you love, like art. It could be photos because Ardra and Nakshatra, when I see Venus or Moon, the two aesthetic planets in Ardra, I often see people are interested in, especially digital photography, love and pets, because those are things Venus can represent. It's like going deep into that and considering, how to say, like image or physical attributes, attractiveness, of these things, because those are the things that Venus represents. They're like sudden insights, and maybe uncovering some sadness here, but also some healing as well. Because it seems like there's some sort of like psychological block here, um, in terms of communicating with self or with others. Uh, because you have to get clear within yourself because before you can really be clear with others usually. Although sometimes you blurt something out, you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. I guess it could go either way. Um, And again, this could be like a hidden fallout with a work colleague or boss because Sun is also involved in this, and Sun represents those things. It could also, I don't usually do much medical stuff, but this could also be OB-GYN issues like pain and sadness, PMS, because Venus is the OB-GYN system or the sexual system for men and women. So it could also be like, testicular pain or something like that. But also, Sun represents the central nervous system and Mercury represents the peripheral nervous system. So there could be some inflammation here, yeah, in these systems medically. Um, then on June 28th, Venus enters Punarvasu nakshatra. So that's that nakshatra with the quiver of arrows, so home base and going out and coming back. And Venus represents travel and vehicles. So towards the end of the month, there might be more, stepping out from this deeper internal place out into the world and actually traveling is what I was seeing here. So, yeah, so, I don't think it's going to be an easy ride for Venus and the things that Venus represents during June, but I think by the end of the month, there should be more clarity that will help move things forward. So that's good. Okay, so then the moon, Chandra transits for June. June 6th, we have a new moon or Amavasya in Taurus for Shiba Rohini. This should be pretty nice, actually, June 6th. So it's a fixed earth sign, Stira Prithvi. Moon is exalted there, so that's nice. It's going to be conjoined with Sun and a Swa Combus Venus and Combus Mercury, both in Rohini. Actually, all three in Rohini. So we're going to have four signs in Rohini. So that's a lot of really beautiful, attractive energy there. And Jupiter is going to be in Krittika. Um, so Jupiter's still trying to figure out what it's doing there, whether it's going to fight or nurture or whatever. But probably since Jupiter's moving into Rohini also, um, I think next week, a week after this might be the start of something really nice. This might actually be like meeting somebody, very attractive. It could also be, beautiful art or vehicles or pets or something like that. Kind of an idealized time. Um, so it could be a very pleasant social time, very pleasant emotional time. maybe potentially creating or nurturing something long term. Potentially. Um, However, not to rain on your parade, but however, on June 21st, we have a full moon in Sagittarius and Danu in Mula Nakshatra. So this is a dual fire sign, Dvasvabhava Agni. This is a neutral sign for a moon. And this is when all of these planets in Rohini are now going to be in Ardra. So, be a little bit cautious here. Again, live your life and enjoy your experiences. But, for Sun, Venus, and Mercury to be in Rohini and then 2 weeks later be in Ardra, that's going to be an abrupt change. It's going to be a very different change in energy. And so there might be some learning or some kind of healing information or epiphany that comes through, if there is some new connection made. There might be, again, looks like there's some disruption a couple weeks out. But then, again, as Sun, Venus, and Mercury move through the rest of Gemini, there's going to be processing all of that fallout. Okay, so there might be disappointment in a relationship. It could also be a project, like our project potentially that hasn't manifested or gone quite the way one had hoped. But there's also the planting seeds of a new, relationship or business with the insights that were gained from this situation. So yeah, the 6th of June might be a happy, happy time, and 21st of June might be quite the opposite, actually. So, but I do separate videos on the new and full moon each month, so look out for those. I'll go into more depth with the exact times and stuff there. Then we have the slow-moving planets, so Jupiter, Guru, Saturn, Shani, and Rahu Ketu. Transits in June. June 2nd, Jupiter just came out of combustion or asta. So, this whole last month, it's been kind of a storm, like with especially student protests going on all around the world related to Middle East things, affairs. And so students and schools were upended because of student protests, and Jupiter represents schools and teaching and teachers. And it also represents things like law and justice and balance. So some of these students got arrested for like occupying buildings and stuff like that. So, and Jupiter was combust, so we weren't seeing a lot of justice or fairness. It was just pretty chaotic. But with Jupiter coming back in view, or not in the shadow of the sun now, we're going to be seeing more justice, balance, generosity, compassion, and teaching. More in harmony here, because those are the things Jupiter represents. And what was interesting too is that I was putting this talk together on June 2nd. That the same day that Jupiter left combustion was when Israel accepted U.S. ceasefire deal, which, especially over the last month or so, it's been, back and forth with a lot of countries trying to get involved and create some sort of ceasefire situation between Israel and Hamas. So I just thought like the timing of that was exquisite. Whether you agree with it or not, I just thought like, wow. I mean, here, with Jupiter and Mercury and Venus in a Venusian sign with Sun, this is like Sun is government, Venus and Jupiter, compassion and law, fairness, equality, some sort of grounded action with Mercury. Mercury and Jupiter together can be like contracts and, contractual law, which would be a ceasefire deal. Bringing some grounded action to what's been a pretty, heavy duty, inflammatory situation for quite a long time. So again, I just thought like literally, I was like, wow, today, it happened to be the day when Jupiter came back online. Wow, that's amazing from the astrology point of view. So then June 3rd, 4th, Jupiter and Mercury were in planetary war. They just came out of that like an hour ago. Um, so this is again finding the right words. This could be an apology. This could also be students versus teachers. Um, Finding some justice in education, that sort of thing. Like I was reading some article about students who are involved in the protests. Like apparently they're getting blacklisted from jobs and stuff like that. So that's a fallout from the decisions that they made during the last month. This could be like, deliberating about reasonable and grounded agreement and contracts, besides like a ceasefire deal or something like that. There are other forms of that. And June 12th, June enters Rohini Nakshatra. So that's going to be pretty nice. I think Jupiter's going to be in Rohini quite a bit of this summer or the next few months. It's not summer everywhere. So this could be, peace, equanimity, writing, singing, publishing, because Rohini is the arts nakshatra, and Jupiter on its own represents writing, singing, publishing. So there could be more of that. Especially for women, as I mentioned, I have a whole video on Venus and Jupiter combust in terms of muhurta auspicious timing. But especially for women, I mentioned, I think in last month's video, that when Venus and Jupiter go combust, because Venus represents, for pretty much everybody, most astrologers will see Venus as the planet representing like spouse or spouse-like partner, romantic partner, that sort of thing. But some astrologers also use Jupiter as the male equivalent to Venus. So especially for women, where Venus and Jupiter were both combust, I know people who yeah, like literally, got separated from their husband and, are in mediation now about what to do. And I don't know if that's going to end in divorce. That's probably going to depend on each person in their own chart or whatever. But a lot of people are having relationship issues. And again, at least Jupiter's coming back online, so that should help. But there's going to be another month after this, that almost another month where Venus is still going to be combust. So this could be still be bring problems to relationships, at least in terms of physical, seeing and being, spending time with potentially loved ones, not only romantic partners, but yeah. So, and that's the thing is, even if you spend time with them, it may not go well. Like you might get into fights and stuff like that because these planets are not demonstrating um, outwardly because they're combust. So, but at least we're moving towards better days. It looks like through the next month and a half or so. Then June 14th, there's an end of the KT59 aspects, and that's because Mercury's moving out of Taurus. Because when you have the dispositor owner of K2, um, K2 sign aspecting it or with it or in 5-9 aspects to it, then you get 5-9 aspects of K2. And so this will also help shift away from this kind of chaotic separation energy that K2's been going in and out of for like the last, really since the fall. So, and this could, what this means is with K2, especially out of, because K2 is currently in an Earth sign of Virgo, and it was been aspecting Capricorn and Taurus on occasion in and out the last few months. And those are all Earth signs. So this could be with K2 out of the mix, a grounded rebuild, especially because you still have, Sun and, Jupiter is aspecting these signs as well. So Jupiter's in the Earth sign of Taurus. It's aspecting the Virgo where K2 is in Capricorn. And especially when Jupiter moves into, we get past this Krittika fight energy and we get into Rohini of like rebuilding. That might be a really nice time for these Earth signs, which have, you know, been going in and out of like, oh, we're steady, oh, we're not steady, oh, we're steady, oh, we're not steady again. Okay. What are we doing today? So, and then June 29th, Saturn goes retrograde or vakri. So whenever a planet goes retrograde, it gets stronger. And Saturn's going to be retrograde till November 15th. So, buckle up, people. I know it's been a tough ride with Saturn. Saturn's going to be in Purva Bhadrapada. So again, that funeral pyre energy, destructive energy for some of this. And then it's going to go back into Shatabisha. So that healing energy, but also potentially delays and obstacles with, health issues. And then November 15th, it's going to go forward again. So it's going to, so Saturn's going to be in Aquarius through next spring. I want to say April. So not quite a year, but almost a year. But again, with Saturn being in Aquarius right now, Saturn is remodeling stuck paradigms, stuck thoughts. So some old philosophy is on its last legs. Because Saturn will not be back in Aquarius for another 20 years, because that's how long it takes Saturn to go through the zodiac. Yeah. So, yeah, really letting go of these old ideas that are no longer serving. And sometimes that's the hardest thing to do, right? We don't even realize how entrenched we are in certain thoughts and mental habits until they're really severely challenged. So, but this is the thing is we gotta probably release this old stuff to move forward into something new. And then what is this? Until July 12th. Oh, um, and then Saturn also, this massive Saturn is going to be aspecting Aries, Scorpio, and Mars, the disposer of Aries and Scorpio, until July 12th. And also Leo. Um, so, yeah, I think I got to go back. Did I say Libra before? Oh no, that was from the Mars perspective. That wasn't from Saturn perspective. So, yeah, because Mars is going to be in Aries for that long. So this is still, even though Mars is bringing some strength and juice and power to Aries and Scorpio, this is still going to be a grind because you got this massive Saturn on both the house and the house lord for both Aries and Scorpio. So Aries and Scorpio people, man, like I'm sure you've been through the mill for a while now. So hang in there. It's a long cycle for sure. Yeah, Saturn is not always easy peasy. But, again, at least Saturn's in its own sign. So Saturn's still going to bring uh, something good will come out of this, even if it's hard and long and probably painful. And there's a lot of skepticism and doubt and anxiety that's popping up with the Saturn. Okay, so hang in there with that. All right, so we got another chart here. This is chart 3. This is the Apollo 11, which you may or may not be familiar with. Apollo 11 was a rocket ship, a spaceship, and it took off. This is a launch date for Apollo 11. It took off on July 16th, 1969 at 9:32 a.m. at Cape Canaveral, Florida in the United States. And why was Apollo 11 important or famous? Because this was the flight that took the first man to the moon. Yeah. So, and you can see it, this chart recreates the current sky pattern because, let's see, what do we have here? We have Mercury in Gemini. We've been talking about that a lot. Rahu and Ketu on the Aries Libra axis. Yes, check. We have that. We have Venus and Taurus. Check. We have that. We have Saturn in Aries. It's not aspecting Aries, but we've got Saturnian energy in Aries. Check. We have Jupiter on all the Earth signs through aspect. Check. And we have Mars and Scorpio. I was like, wow, it's like, so much similarity. Anyway, the Lagna Nakshatra was Maga, so leadership and ancestors. So tradition, we saw the Maga energy in the chart of the Dalai Lama. Sun Nakshatra and Punarvasu, again, home base and going out and returning. So the sun is purpose, and the sun is the Lagnesha here. So, and you can see here in the first house with the rising sign of Maga. It was interesting. Nothing was aspecting the first house, but the sun, which is the ruler of the first house, has gone to the 12th house of long distance travel and isolated places. It's like how much, you know, at that time the moon was like, unfathomable, and now we're like trying to go farther to like Mars and stuff like that, right? But the other thing that I thought was hilarious, s- check this out, is you have the moon, you have the moon in the 12th house in its own sign. Couldn't get over. I'm laughing now. I'm trying to keep a straight face, but I can't do it. You have literally, literally a government or leadership going out as part of the moon, and then on top of the sun, moon in its own sign, combination of the 12th house. Then you have Rahu, which is like, unusual, unexpected, energy coming from the eighth house of deep psychology of ambition, aspecting onto the sun moon combination in the 12th house. Like that alone, like I'm just like, like frame that. It was like it was. I mean, it's like almost so literal you can't help but laugh. It's like pretty. I don't know. As an astrologer, I thought it was hilarious. Anyway, let's try to keep it together. The moon is the moon actually. The moon is in its own sign, a very strong moon. Um, and then a newish moon just coming out of a new, a complete conjunction with the sun here. Um, and the moon is in Ashlesha, so Ashlesha symbolized by a snake, and there's this like energy with Ashlesha of being like very mesmerizing and attractive, like something you can't keep your eyes off of. And the moon represents the public, so this is the public mesmerized, like stuck to their TVs, watching this happen over a few days. Like, are they gonna make it? Are they gonna crash and burn? Like, what's going on? Like, are people even trying this? Like, I'm sure people were taking bets and like, will they make it? Is this gonna happen? So yeah, and people all over the world, not just the United States, right? Because we're talking about the 12th house of foreign places, isolated places, long distance places. The day lord was Mercury. So Mercury in its own sign, in the 11th house here, clubs, group, society, also money. So this was, I'm sure, because it was successful, complete buildup financially, of financing for the space race. And Mercury is not only Swa in the 11th house of income, but look, Mercury is also the lord of the second house, which is, another money house. So this is because of the success here. We just got like money and money piling up to do more of this kind of stuff. The Hurrah Lord was Saturn, and you can see Saturn is in the ninth house of government. It's debilitated here. And Saturn is in which nakshatra? I think it's in Bharani. Yeah, Saturn's in Bharani. So this is like what I was saying here. So even though Saturn's debilitated, Saturn is in this nakshatra Bharani, a womb again, cycles of birth and death. This is the end of some, I think, strictures or kind of obstacles with government, and the start of a whole new division program, boosting of NASA and all this kind of stuff. So a very precarious position, but in the end, the start of a whole new thing here and long term, right? So the birth to Shah here is Mercury, Sun, Saturn, Jupiter. So again, a lot of money coming in because of this success here. Sun, going out to outer space, and 12th house just kills me. I can't get over it. And then Saturn, a revision, a major deep structural revision in government and funding the space race. And then Jupiter, what's Jupiter doing here? Jupiter is also in the second house. Jupiter is a lot of oral communication in the house of oral communication. And you've got it here with K2. So people talking about, this weird idea stuff going on here. And Jupiter is in what? Jupiter and K2 are both in Uttar Falguni. So there's a lot of like talk about, not only finance here, because Jupiter can be banks and stuff like that, but like there's enjoyment and luxury and this sort of thing, because, frankly, it is a luxury, right? I mean, a lot of people debate, like, should we be spending money on going to the moon or actually feeding people here on Earth, and giving people water and, sanitary food and conditions and education. It's like, I'm sure, why are we bothering with this when we can barely, some people can barely manage on this planet. But anyway, so that's part of this here. But yeah, there's a whole lot of conversation about, this whole weird, unusual endeavor of even trying to get to the moon. And what else? Yeah, I talked about recreation there. So let's go through. So the Lugna is Leo or Simha. Six fire signs, so strong fire energy, a lot of action here. And Mriga, again, this is like ancestors. This is a historical moment here, historical leadership. First time it's ever been done. Um, Successfully. I don't know if they tried before. The sun has gone to the 12th house. It's just I can't even like talk about it with it. Okay, let me try to get it together again. So the 12th house is a moksha sthana, so house of liberty, right? Of enlightenment and liberty and freedom. So, going beyond the limits of even our atmosphere and even the limits of the mind. Because the moon here in the 12th house not only represents the public and literally the moon, but also the imagination, right? I mean, this is like literally blew people's minds that this actually happened here back in the day. Leading a liberating imagination, public and foreign isolated places. Yes, yes, yes. Swan moon in its own sign, yeah. And then this Rahu is just going to give it more drive and, strangeness and, bizarreness. I mean, this is like people are like, is this for real? Um, and then what's interesting too is Rahu is in Purva Bhadrapati here. So there's like this destructive energy, like, of Rahu in the eighth house of deep psychology. Again, this is like blowing people's minds and it's blowing people's limits in terms of what they think is possible this moment in time. So, and then, it's an ambitious release and transformation. And then we've got some yogas here. We've got a Richika yoga. This is Mars in its own sign and a Kendric Trikona. The Kendras are the four houses in the middle, and the Trikonas are the three uh, houses, like 159. They form a triangle. Um, So Richika Yoga, this is gonna be a massive, powerful Mars here. So again, Mars is in the eighth constellation of Scorpio, deep psychological, emotional transformation here, leadership here. And Mars is in what? Mars is in Anuradha. So Mars is in Anuradha nakshatra. Anuradha is nakshatra symbolized by a victory gate, or victory or triumph, victory arch. And it's all about building bridges and alliances, which again, with the successful, landing on the moon, all of a sudden, not only do you have money coming in, but you have all these people who want to jump on board, the success train here. Um, so this Mars is very powerful, and also in terms of innovation and leadership. And on top of that, in addition, you have a Malavi yoga. This is Venus in its own sign. And these two, so you got Mars in its own sign in the fourth house, Venus in its own sign in the 10th house. So, and the 10th house represents career, but also fame. So Venus represents things like cars and vehicles or spaceships. When you get all this fire coming from Mars here onto this Venus in its own sign, this is a transformational vehicle that's famous. Apollo 11. Yeah. And Venus is in what? Venus is in which nakshatra? Did I write? I did not write it. What is that? One, two. I think Venus might be in Rohini. Um, I'll check on that. I'm pretty sure. One, two, three. Let's do the math here. 10. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Venus is in Rohini. So again, this very attractive, seductive, like beautiful vehicle, just like mesmerizing the public here. Innovative and fiery. I mean, Lamborghini of the sky. You can think about. The other thing is this Venus in the 10th house. Not only 10th house not only represents career and fame, but also the 10th house represents the sky. So a huge, beautiful, powerful vehicle in the sky. I mean, if you even think about this one, this chart just like some charts just like completely crack me up. I mean, and this one did. As you can see. So when you have this Richika yoga, Mars in its own sign, with Venus in its own sign, opposing each or aspecting each other too. This is power and innovation and design of like travel and vehicles. I mean, yeah, okay. Then the second house I started been talking about. The second house lord is this massive Swa, Mercury, and Punarvasu. So Mercury having a home base and going out and coming back. I think that's a lot about financing, but it's also about, clubs, groups, and society. So they're probably people who literally, um, went to some place, like a TV or if they were near in the sky or something like that, like to try to see what they could see up in the sky or on TV or something, or listen to the news. People were going to places to follow this whole endeavor. You have Jupiter and Ketu and Uttara Falguni. So there's, enjoyment here, and travel, foreign travel, business ideas, money, groups. You can see how this is all folding together. And again, for unusual funding and speech about, kind of strange. Again, at that time, this was a very strange, like nobody really thought this was going to happen type thing. And enjoying it, having fun with it. Yeah, I mean, people were pulling up chairs and, eating dinner around this and popping popcorn. It was a huge event. So then the third house here, the third house lord is this massive swa Venus. It's aspected by Saturn, and Saturn is actually exalted in Libra. So this, what I was seeing here is that this is like an official recording, official kind of authority or government recording of history with this massive, vehicle of the sky, a victorious vehicle of the sky. And then, what else do we have? In the fourth house here, again, this massive, this Mars here. The other thing is that this Mars has aspecting on it is this like Rahu, this Purva Bhadrapada Rahu, transformational Rahu in the deep psychology of like, I mean, I'm sure the people who thought this was even possible, they all called him nuts and stuff like, like how are we ever going to get to the moon? Like, is that even like, don't even think about it. I mean, it's like crazy talk and they did it, right? So then the crazy people become geniuses overnight when they're successful, right? So then, okay. Ambition, so this fourth house, ambition and success and building bridges, bringing people together, pioneering land and vehicles. Because it's not only the vehicles, right? But it's like we actually got to, right? We could put our little flag, on the moon. We can, claim it, our human nature to like go claim, put a flag in it and claim it. We got to claim that new land up in the sky. And also diverging from tradition. Because again, this is completely contra to what a lot of people thought was possible. Yeah. So, yeah, what here? Then I skipped the fifth house. I mean, I could just say it. I didn't write it down, but the fifth house, well, I could go back and write it, I guess. Fifth house is aspected by this Mercury. So again, long distance travel, home and going back. It's in the Sagittarius, so philosophy. Um, And you can see there's a lot of advisement here. This is an advisor, what is it? Advising house, and how do I say, the dispositor, the owner of this house of Sagittarius is Jupiter. It's gone to the second house. So again, this is a lot of, I see more of like travel and banking and money and investment advisement here going on here, in terms of like, is this worth the money and should we do it and how much money and how do we get this much money to make this happen type thing. Then the sixth house, we have a debilitated Saturn aspecting its own house. So there's going to be strength here, and we have this Jupiter aspecting here. So what else do we have here? It's also aspected by Moon and Sun. So I think all the governments and people and naysayers and people talking like and saying this is never going to happen. It's like this Saturn is just like crushing all that. Like, yeah, well, let me prove it to you. Let me just crush all that dissent, all that like negative talk, and just show you, show, what is it like? I'll see it when I believe it. Well, now you have to believe it because you saw it. So, it's just like just cutting all that out. It's like, okay, we did it. Like, let's move on and do some more. Then the seventh house Lord is this debilitated Saturn aspected by this massive Mars. So again, this is innovation. This Mars is innovation. It's an innovative planet, and it's in the house of again Aquarius, fixed ideas. So this is like just busting up old paradigms of what's possible, and it's probably also busting up relationships here because now all the people who said, "Oh, this is never going to happen," now they're like, "Oh, I want in on this," I want in on this. So let me get a piece of the action. So that's what's going on in the seventh house. Then the eighth house here, the eighth house lord is Jupiter, and it's aspecting its own sign. So again, that's going to make this eighth house very strong and very alternative. Like just the Jupiter aspecting its own sign, that's going to make this, a deep psychology about what's possible, and thinking alternatively, thinking outside the box. And then Rahu is also like a, think outside the box. So this is a very innovative endeavor here that was germinated. Also, the eighth house can be a lot of deep research. I mean, all the years and trials and how do you even start that? Like just the idea, somebody has the idea of going to the moon, but then you actually have to like, wire the thing and create the suits and train the people. I mean, that's like a huge endeavor right there. And then the ninth house, again, the ninth house lord is a swa Mars with the debilitated Saturn. This is again a changing of the guard in terms of authority and government. So what I was seeing here is it's like, all right, we had a certain crew that got us to this point. Now that we've proved ourselves and this has been successful, now we're going to like really get more people and more investors involved, not the what are they not the first adopter people, right, who are like seem kind of crazy in the beginning and then they're successful and people are like, "Oh, I want some of that too." But these are the people who need to like, hang back a little bit and they'll be like the second or third round of people who come in. And now that they see like a modicum level of success, they're like, okay, I want in now. Those are those people. But there's like a changing of the guard because again, there's some new blow up, grow up of space travel and exploration. And then what do we have here? The 10th house, again, this massive Saturn. Oh, sorry, massive SWA Venus aspected by a massive Mars and also Jupiter. Successful, enjoyable, solid ride up into space. Yeah. The 11th house, I've already mentioned the SWA Mercury, money, 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 cha-ching, cha-ching. It's also aspected by Mars, so innovation and development of new funding opportunities. And also you have a debilitated Saturn here. So again, Mars and Saturn, this is like new money for engineering. Also overcoming authority ideas, this kind of reluctant government here, because again, it might be that, the government could only, kept the purse strings pretty tight because they're like, well, we don't want to just blow all of our money into this thing. We don't know what's going to happen. But once this is successful, it's like, whoop, the floodgates open and here comes all the dough, to do more of the stuff. And then the 12th house I've been mentioning with this, sun, the lugnatia of the chart going off in deep space with this from this place of deep psychology and imagination um, to the moon. So there you go. Apollo 11 launching. Okie doke. So, as you've been seeing, we've been talking a lot about Taurus, Vrishabha, and Gemini, Mithuna, Rashi's constellations over the next month of June. So, if you like to be your own astrologer, first advice is don't freak yourself out. Sometimes a little information people freak out. So just, see what you see, take it with a grain of salt, and just learn what you can. And even maybe keep notes on, how the planets are transiting and what you experience, and that'll teach you a lot about your own chart. So, what you can do though is look at where Taurus and Gemini are in terms of which house they are for you. Like, is Taurus the second house for you? Is Gemini the sixth house for you? And then what you can do, I have a whole playlist on the different houses and bhavas if you learn about the details there. Like, let's say Taurus is your first house, um, which represents self, personality, health, and reputation. So if you're a Taurus rising, uh, you're generally pretty grounded person, but you're going to have a lot of probably really lovely moments when all those planets are going through Rohini in the next week or so. And then we have opposites at the seventh house, representing spouse, partnership, and independent business. And we have the 2/8 Bhava house axis. So you can see the things that very simply, I've just put in a few words here. So you can start to see like what areas of life the planets moving through Taurus and Gemini will bring to you. And then the 3/9 axis here. And then on the next slide, we've got the 4/10 axis of houses, the 5/11 axis of houses, and the 6/12 axis of houses. So that you can make it a little bit more personal to you. Again, I'm doing collective energy here to give some general overview for the month. That's helpful, but you've always got to fine tune it and dial it in for yourself in your own chart. Okay. So there you go. As always, I want to thank you for hanging out and coming and listening to one of my talks. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And if you like to look at other birth charts of famous people, places, and moments in time that I've analyzed, I have that whole list in a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2024 with a list of all the charts I've looked at and the videos you can find them in if you like to learn astrology that way. I also offer individual birth chart readings. I do them live on Zoom and as pre-recorded video. If you're interested in that, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. And I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine, which covers other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, as well as yoga, and other paradigms of natural medicine such as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so you can check that out if that's helpful to you. And yeah, otherwise, thank you all for all of your support, stopping by, listening to one of my talks, subscribing to the channel, liking videos, sharing videos, leaving comments, asking questions, engaging in any way. Some people have offered very generous donations for my work. I appreciate the feedback and the support in those various ways that are true to your heart. So thank you for all of that. Um, and as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so you take good care, and until the next one, namaste.